Welcome to the Valley of Outlaws podcast with me, Will Flindle. A podcast for those taking the road less trodden, and a podcast for those seeking more. In this week's episode, I'm joined by Jordan Carl Jones, a digital nomad. Jordan is someone who had the 9-to-5 job and broke free from it. He set an intention to follow his heart, to live a life that was interesting. And from travelling around the world, from working in bars, from working on the small jobs, he slowly found a position and a career path for him using his skills in graphic design. He spent time trying to understand how and where he could make money and bring stability into his life, whilst also challenging himself to live an exciting, exceptional life. This conversation covers many topics, many insecurities, many lessons learned, and for anyone who dreams of having the travelling digital nomad lifestyle, it gives a real understanding and an eye-opening account for really the struggle initially that can occur, but for those who persevere, for those who stick around and find a path to make it work, it can be extremely rewarding. So, without further ado, let's begin the episode. So you are Outlaw number 9.
Ooh.
How does that feel?
Feels good. 9 feels like a significant number.
Why is that?
I don't know. I feel like in various cultures, I feel like 9 has a... I think in Thailand, where I just was,
Yeah.
it's always like the Wi-Fi password are always 8 for some reason.
So you've gone to 9 now?
I don't know. I don't know. I haven't been able to do my research on numbers before the pod. I didn't realise we were getting straight into it. But yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so look, give you a little outline to everybody listening. This podcast, and the reason why I'm so excited to have Jordan on, is because he lives in Thailand, works in Thailand as a freelancer, and he runs a business himself, which is himself as a graphic designer. But hopefully the conversation we're going to have will really give an insight into what the life is like, actually how you deal with the stresses of trying to find work and maintain work and delivering work and such short period contract times and long period contract times, but then also about the greater meanings of life and everything you've kind of discovered on your travels, because you've travelled, my friend, and you've travelled far.
I have travelled.
Okay, so let's go first question. In your own words, tell me who you are, what you do, and why do you do what you do?
Okay, so my name is Jordan Jones. I am a graphic designer. Who am I? I always feel like sometimes I don't want to describe myself as my profession. I feel like sometimes that is what we fall back into, but I guess it's the easiest way of doing things sometimes. So yeah, I'm a graphic designer. I've been working as a graphic designer since I was 19, maybe like 20. When I left university, when I was younger, I basically went down the traditional route of like going to school, going to college, going to university, and I'd studied graphic design when I was at school because my uncle, my aunt at the time started seeing a guy who, and I never really had any idea what I wanted to do when I was a kid. And my uncle, my auntie started seeing a guy when I was younger, and he was working as a graphic designer, and I thought this was a very cool position. I was kind of looking at the time for any kind of inkling of direction in terms of like what I wanted to choose, like in terms of like career and various things. And so it looked like he had a pretty cool job, and I was like, and I'd done graphics while at school, but graphics was like a lot of drawing and various different things, and I was pretty good at it, but it just I did work experience with him, and I kind of was just like, okay, this is the easy option. I'll just go to college, study graphic design, in order to kick the bucket a bit further down the road, so then I don't have to decide what I'm going to do for the rest of my life just yet. I can just keep kicking the bucket in. And once college had finished, I still had the same feeling that I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I was like, okay, let's go to university, because that's another 3 years where I don't need to like figure out what I need to do in my life. And then I finished university. And I got, obviously, then you start searching for jobs because that's the natural progression. And I got a job at a men's fashion company called Loop 1977. And I started working there, and also during the time I was also interviewing at a web design place, and they also offered me a job. So I had the choice between working as a graphic designer for the fashion company, continuing that, or working as a graphic designer as a web designer. And I remember going in and ahhing about this decision a lot, and I decided to basically ask myself what did I want to get out of this life, and like what one offered me that. And I always just thought, okay, I want to have as fun a life as possible. And so when I asked myself the question, which one was more fun, it seemed like the fashion one would be more fun. And so I decided to stick with that, and I ended up working there for a year and a half. But after a year, I got very miserable, very stressed, very depressed, and from having the monotonous lifestyle of going to work, not in the morning, but the work was like an hour's drive away. And so I'd drive an hour to work, work all day basically until like 6 o'clock, and then drive an hour and a half back. And that lifestyle was really just started sucking the life out of me a little bit. And I started becoming like very stressed, very depressed, but I had no prior experience with it. And I started itching all over my body. This was like an interesting thing. I started it was really strange, but like I just started itching all over, and I thought I had some kind of like skin disease. So I went to the doctors, and like they gave me a load of creams because they thought I might have scabies, or like, I swear this is actually happening, and all this different stuff. And I go home, I put the creams on, all this kind of stuff, like leave it for a few days or whatever, and then still like really like just itching all over, like it's affecting my sleep, I'm itching at work, all this kind of stuff. And I go back to the doctor, I'm like, look, I've tried these creams, did all this kind of stuff, and it's still not working. And he's like started asking me about my life and started asking me about work. And he was like, oh, like, are you stressed, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, look, I've got to be honest, I hate my job, to be honest. Like the kind of going, it was just like, just being sat in front of a computer all day and not actually, I don't know, I didn't feel like I was alive. And there was something inside my body that was like freaking out. And he basically told me, he was like, look, I'm pretty sure this itching that you're experiencing is like just your body's reaction to stress. Like it's like it's something to do with your work environment and what you're doing, blah, blah, blah. And it just all made sense in my mind. And it was like, something just clicked into place where I was like, okay, I need to quit my job because this isn't making me happy.
How can I ask a question about quitting the job? Was that a fear to do that, or was that was it like you had a fear of being judged by doing that, or? Yeah,
for sure. So just to give you like some kind of context, my dad was a big inspiration in my life. Like he'd had a massive effect on me, as parents always do. But my dad had worked the same job from when he was 16 until 62. He worked as a pattern maker. And I remember growing up watching him go to work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, his entire life. And he had a lot of struggles with work, a lot of like difficulties around work. There's some, like, for a period he really loved his job, but then certain things changed and he used to come home very miserable, very stressed. And I think that's what had a massive impact on me when I saw myself going down the same path. So when I saw myself going down the same kind of path, like when I was going to work, and like kind of freaking out, basically, having this like stress response, it was because I kind of flashed forwards my life of me like 10 years in advance, 20 years in advance, and I'd still be doing the same thing and like not feeling alive. There'd been a short period while I was at university, because I decided to stay home. Like I went to the University of Wolverhampton. It's not the best university in the world, but at the time I hadn't really considered that. I hadn't really considered that other universities gave a better quality of education. I just thought for some reason that all universities across the country gave the same quality of education. Obviously, looking back now, that wasn't that obviously wasn't accurate. But at the time, I was just like, oh well, they all give degrees, they all do the thing. I'll just go to the one closest to home. It's easy. And I ended up. So because I decided not to move away from university, I went to work in Cyprus, like during the summers. My friend had asked me to go and work in Cyprus, a place called Ayia Napa, big party place, that kind of stuff. And that was and I did that. It was a crazy time in my life. But it was during the summers when university was off, and it kind of opened my eyes to what life could be in terms of like moving out of country, working abroad, that kind of thing. So when I'd gone into that 9 to 5 kind of lifestyle, I'd had that perspective of, I had it to compare to. And what I'd realised when I was working that job, wasn't making tons of money, but I was like, that was my first proper job at university, and it was like, this is what you're going to be doing basically, and like this is like a career. I compared it to my happiness level to when I was working in Cyprus, working at bars. I was only earning €20 a night, but I was super happy. But now I was doing what I was supposed to be doing, like going down the career path, going like getting your degrees and stuff, and then going to work. And I was miserable. And I was like, well, there's something not linking up here. And so yeah, that's when I had that kind of response, like that stress response, and I decided to quit. And that's what you asked. You were like, was it scary? Did I feel like I was putting,
Yeah. What's super interesting is that everything you said so far, you can guarantee that most people have thought exactly the same thing and felt the same thing if they've not really connected to that kind of career path. You know, they've started ticking boxes. They've not overly thought about too far ahead in the future. And what you've done is early on, luckily, you've managed to find a connection with working abroad and the idea that you don't have to be fixed in England to have a successful life for yourself and be happy. And that's taken you in this kind of trajectory, which is also so many people dream of the trajectory you've ended up having, this kind of freedom to work abroad. So like this part now, I'm really happy just letting you talk, because the way you're talking is just clicking in so many things in my mind of actually how your decision making led to where you are today and the thoughts, and so please carry on with that, because I think it is got so much value for people who are in a similar position now.
Yeah, well, just to put it in perspective, yes, quitting my job the first time was very scary. So it's like, I kind of describe it to your first relationship. When you go through your first relationship or first kind of anything, and you're in that kind of perspective, it's like that's all you know. It's like your first job. Quitting your first job, it's like you don't know what's out there because you've never experienced it. It's like you're escaping the fishbowl for the first time. So I had all of this, like these fears, like, oh, if I quit my job, am I ever going to find another job? Am I ever going to do this? Maybe I'm throwing away a good opportunity, yada, yada, yada. It's the same like when you're going for a breakup. It's like, oh, am I ever going to meet somebody again? Or is that it for me? Was that person the one? And now I've lost it, yada, yada. So it's like all those natural fears come up. But, but it was just the association, like the stress of, and just the fear of just not doing something with my life that made me feel alive was like almost like too much. Like, I mean, like I said, I had like, people talk to me a lot like about like the life that I'm living now and the life that I've lived like the last 10 years and different stuff, and it's like, wow, you're so brave, or blah, blah, blah. Like they hold me in high regard for making the decisions that I did. But at the same time, I don't feel like it was my choice almost. It felt like it was like my body, or like there's something inside me, that inner knowing knows more than me in a sense. It was like, because I've like learned about different things, like in terms of like Gabor Mate's teachings, and like when the body says no, like various different things. It's like our bodies hold a certain intelligence. They send us signals, and it's our job to listen to them. And the problems start when we don't listen to them. We try and suppress them. And it's like, say, for instance, if I'd have gone to that doctor and would have told him it was stress, or I'm experiencing this, and he would be like, oh, you're just dealing with stress from work and blah, blah, blah. You can jump on these antidepressants and like these will help like mediate your emotions and stuff. And then instead of actually making the change, I maybe would have just suppressed the emotions just that little bit, just to be comfortable in like this like life of me, like, I don't know, just this steady...
Mundane,
yeah, exactly. Mundane kind of like lifestyle, instead of actually listening to that negative experience and making the change because of it. It's like, I don't feel like our bodies do anything by accident. Like, I guess to a degree, but I mean, I feel like I believe that negative emotion in itself leads to positive action. It's like our negative experiences that we feel in the body, initially they don't feel good, but it's like they lead to positive action. It's like when you eat loads of terrible food, or like you eat junk food today, in the short term it feels good, but then you're gonna kind of feel a bit terrible, a bit groggy, and you'll wake up the next day and you think, oh, maybe I need to go work out, and it's because you feel bad. It like initiates that kind of like momentum to go. And
I can relate to it a lot in terms of like the whole 9 to 5. When I was working in architecture, and I did it for 3 months, but the one thing I saw was my future for the next 30 years, sitting behind a desk doing the same thing, and it freaked me out more than anything else because I wasn't in control of what my future was, in the sense of like, okay, I had the same things, but I didn't have the excitement or the emphasis I thought my life would have. And it's an interesting thing also when you grow up, because you think your life is always going to be really like, it's going to be the one life that changes the world. You think you're going to do this, you're going to do that. And as you get older, you kind of go, no, I'm just going to exist. But when you're younger at that point, it's like you can either make or break. You can either be happy and kind of sit and think of a long-term thing like, right, I'm going to work here, build a really good experience, have a career, and, you know, go down the standard routes, tick the boxes. Or in other cases, it's like, actually, no, I'm going to go on an adventure of the unknown, living at my edge, and see how I respond. And I think like a lot of that relates to what you're like as well, in that sense, like this kind of bodily response, this intuition, which was telling you, you know, you can see what this is going to be like if you do this for many years, and actually how you're not going to enjoy this. So this kind of expressing of like, right, I need to go and escape out of that and live within this kind of like in the moment, reactionary kind of living and experience, I feel like is that kind of natural way it took you in that sense, away from, you know, consistency and predictability.
Yeah, well, like just to because it's bringing me back to that moment quite a bit actually. So just to give more perspective on that job at the time, it was like I was the first graphic designer to work for the company. I was employed as a junior graphic designer, but I had nobody above me. I was like the graphic designer, and there was like 5 people in the design suite. This massive company, and so when I decided I was going to quit, it was like I was a big part of the team that was leaving. I was like 1/5 of the team, and I felt a lot of pressure. And my boss wasn't the most emotionally stable guy in the world. Like I'd seen him have like emotional outbursts at certain things. Like, so I was like, oh, this is not going to be that easy to just walk in there and like hand my notice in. Nobody had ever quit for him before. Everybody who I'd met had been with him since the start of the company, so nobody had ever quit the job before. So I was the first one to like go in there, and I was very nervous, like I said before. I went in there to tell him that I was handing my notice in, but what was interesting actually, an interesting coincidence, and it'll link it to how we met, was when I'd been to the doctors and decided I was going to quit my job because I needed to quit my job because I was itching all over and just had this stress response. I was thinking, okay, I want to quit my job, but I felt like I needed a reason, like I needed an excuse. I couldn't just quit my job to like not do anything. Like I didn't have another job lined up, or I didn't have any reason like to do anything. And what was interesting was during that period, I'm trying to figure things out. I think it was only like a few days after I decided I was going to quit my job. One of my friends from Cyprus called me up, a mutual friend of ours now, Josh, called me up and he goes, Jordan, we're going to do something called the Camino de Santiago. It's in memory of our mutual friend Jake's brother. And he was like, would you want to come and do it with us? We'll send you a movie, you can have a watch, blah, blah. And I was like, dude, I don't even need to watch the movie. Like this, yeah, I want to do it. Like, and that was almost like, I don't know, like a golden leaf. Yeah, golden ticket. It was something that was just offered to me. It was just like the timing was right. I needed a reason I felt like I needed a reason to quit. Like, but you don't need a reason technically.
Yeah, but I was going to say, why did you feel that?
I don't know. I think I've got like a deep fear of like I don't like letting people down.
Or you think you're going to let like your family down from quitting your job?
No, so this is the thing is I like to be like, so because I went for a men's fashion company, I used to get my dad a lot of discount on like clothing and stuff, and he used to love it. So I'd get him like I'd get him like really fancy clothes and stuff, and like a good like discount on different things, and he loved me working there. He was like, this is cool because you're getting a perk out of it. So I did feel a bit of pressure when I was going to tell my dad I was going to quit, but they were super supportive. Like when I said, look, I'm miserable, and they knew I was itching, like knew I was stressed and a bit sad down. And my dad has always been a big proponent because he did the, like I said, 16 till 62. He's done that lifestyle where he's like given his life to work basically, and they kind of screwed him over in the end, and he didn't treat him as well as they should have. And I think he kind of has a bit of like resentment towards them, and rightly so, like to a degree. But yeah, so when I told him like I was thinking about quitting my job, I kind of expected him to be like, oh, now like maybe reconsider, but he didn't do that at all. He was like, dude, just do whatever you need to do, make you happy. I'm always going to be behind you, like super supportive.
How does that make you feel when you've got that kind of support from your parents in that sense, just to say, look, there's no boundaries, this is your life, live it how you want to live it?
So it's a beautiful thing, really is a beautiful thing. But at the same time, it's interesting. I always think like there's aspects of us like who like the grass is always greener. Like I'll never like want to change my parents, but it's like so there is some part of me sometimes that wish wishes I had more direction. Like when I meet people whose like parents are like, oh, okay, we want you to do this, want you to do this, da 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 da, and they've got a very specific life planned out for them. Some part of me is a little bit jealous because it's like, oh wow, at least they had like direction from very young. But at the same time, I'm very aware that I really wouldn't want that either. When I've met people who are like pushed into careers like, okay, you have to be a doctor, you have to be a dentist, you have to be a lawyer, whatever. A lot of those people like end up very miserable because it's like they didn't get a chance to explore who they actually are. And a lot of those people do leave that kind of lifestyle and end up finding something else. But I had the opposite. I was like never pressured into doing anything. So in a way, I felt like I lacked a lot of direction or a lot of like knowing where to go. But in a way, that's what's led me to living such a wild kind of like lifestyle. But I've always been searching, I think, always searching for that kind of like feeling of like, okay, this is where I'm going.
Do you think you'll ever stop, or that feeling, whatever, the feeling of searching, whatever, reduced? Do you think you'll ever come to a place and feel like I found it? Or do you think because you haven't had that, because let's be honest, at the moment, it's not like you have like an end goal for what it's going to be. So do you think that this searching feeling you'll ever get to a point where you're like, actually, this is it? This is the best version of me, the utopia I'm trying to get to?
I'm not sure if we ever do. I think we have like moments in life where we capture that time.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like, we can sustain it for a while, but then the moment passes. I feel like it's like, say, I've just come back from Pi. Pi is my favorite place in the world. It's where I feel like I'm my best. It's like, I always describe Pi, like when I was there, like for the first period, I was like, if Pi was a woman, if I met a girl that made me feel the same way that Pi makes me feel, I'd marry her tomorrow. Like, facts. No, I'm serious.
I love
because
that.
it's like, it brings out the best in me. It's like, I feel like we each know the best version of ourselves, and we each know when we feel like the true embodiment of who we feel we are. It's like when our thoughts match our actions match, we look in the mirror and we're like, yeah, this is me, everything's sweet. But even in Pi recently, like I've been there for 10 months, and over the last, like say, I don't know, about 4 months ago, maybe after the 6 month period, it passes like a point where it's like, okay, the novelty kind of wears off, like looking at the mountains every day, or like growing up in your house, like going to like smoothie bowls and like all this kind of like natural lifestyle that you're very appreciative of when you first get there because you've just come from the UK or whatever. It kind of wears off, and it's like that kind of, I don't know, that not cynicism, but like that kind of taking life a bit for granted. That feeling kind of comes up, and that's kind of when we want to, like, I feel like I need to change or leave for a while, so then in order I can go back and refresh those feelings. And I feel like that's what people probably experience in relationships too. Like sometimes they get so accustomed to one another that they take each other for granted, and they start not really. And I was very aware of this. It's like, I love Pi. And it's like, so when I was feeling these feelings of like, I don't know, just waking up and being a bit like, another day, like the same kind of thing, I would never actually link it to the place. It's more like, this is just an experience that I'm feeling. Maybe it's just a sign that my body's saying, okay, time for us just to leave for a bit so we can have a refresh and then go back just to like up the batteries or up whatever.
Okay.
You want
So to bring it back in terms of that, so you've quit your job, you've walked the Camino de Santiago. At that point in time...
I didn't say that we did that though, because basically so we quit the job. So, okay, I quit the job. My friends asked me to do the Camino de Santiago. Then we leave and actually go and do the Camino de Santiago. That's what I meant. You, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay, so you're at that point there. What's your relationship with a working career? Because this is what I think is going to be interesting, is that you've obviously developed a skill. You've got a skill which actually is very broad in terms of what you can do and how you can work doing it. You know, and some people might say, well, yeah, Jordan, it's a great story, but, you know, the career path you've gone down, it allows that flexibility. So what's your relationship with how seriously are you seeing a career and your life, and what's the importance to it? What are you putting your preference in? Obviously life first there, but you're obviously going to have a part where, like, I need to make money, I need to do this, I need to do that. So
you mean during that period,
just that transitional period before you actually get into being settled as like a real kind of like, I'm going to say nomad, digital nomad, but there's a transition period to that. So what's your relationship to it? What is your drive to actually trying to build something from that?
Okay, so I had like, it was like, at that point it was like zero. The day that I actually decided I was going to quit my job, I handed my notice in. and I was like done. And like that was a day of massive relief. But when I actually had my last day at work, I was driving home in my Volkswagen Bora, and I remember being so fucking happy, dude. I was like really happy. It was like there's something in me. I have like I almost feel like I have two very distinct sides that I've been trying to balance for a long time actually. And there's the disciplined, hardworking, like routine, sticking to go getter, like this is what we need to do. But there's also the adventure, wanderlust, like the part of me that like acknowledges that, okay, maybe I'm only going to be, well, as far as I know, you only live once. Only ever going to be this person once. Like try and live every day like it's your last. Like take life by both hands, and trying to balance those two kind of sides of like the discipline side is like almost like not sacrificing the present moment, but sacrificing like short term
happiness.
Yeah.
Okay.
For long term sustainability and happiness. So it's like, but also I've got that part of me that's really strong. That like just the seek for adventure, that just going wild and very spontaneous part. So I've been trying to balance that. But at the time during that Camino de Santiago, after I decided to quit, I'd saved up some money. I was like, okay, let's just go for it. Like I'd let go of all that inner pressure.
What were you going for?
What the Camino?
No. And just in terms of your mindset at that time. So you said once we doing, you said
I was just completely
like,
just looking.
Career was gone, and it's just like I'm going to travel and just
I didn't really.
free.
Honestly, I just didn't even think about it. I was like, I just want to embrace life. I just want to live.
Okay,
that was it. It was like, and I really did. I felt like so alive during that time. It was like just especially during the Camino, just waking up every day, packing my bags, putting my boots on. Okay, set off like 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. We walk. What's the mission? It's okay. We walk from this place to this place. Boom. And then what happens along the way happens along the way. You meet people, you eat food, whatever. You know what I mean? And that was it. I was like, okay, it was like one of the happiest times of my life. My life was so simple and just like that certain mission. I was like, there's something inside that like I really relate to with that kind of existence of just like the simplicity of it.
Yeah.
Just like, okay, like having a conversation with somebody, seeing a sunset, like a lot of these things are free. Just walking, just seeing somewhere new. It's like I've realized for myself that there's very little that's better for my brain or like clearing that fog than going somewhere I've never been before and just experiencing new smells. It's like, you know, when you see a dog with its head out the window when you're driving a car or something, and it's just going on the road and it's just got its head out. I mean, I heard like somebody say it's basically like they're reading a book or something because there's so many smells and different things going into it. It's like that's how I feel when I travel or go somewhere new.
Yeah, I get that because also it's like when you drive somewhere for the first time, it's slower. So it's slower on the way there because you're absorbing so much more than on the way back you're absorbing less. And
that would make sense.
You get used to that journey, like it's a very similar thing. So how long, Kate, between this kind of cut away from a traditional career how long was it of you traveling before you started going, right, okay, well, this is my life, this is how I want to live my life. Now I need to build a life where I can sustain it like this. How many months or maybe was it a year that you spent just traveling and, you know, working in bars, making money, but you probably got to a point where you sat down and went, right, well, I've got this graphic design skill. I want to use it, but I want to be able to do it around my lifestyle. Okay,
so just to fill people in, it's like after the Camino de Santiago, when I worked down in Portugal, and because I had the bar experience, I was working at bars there basically and just partying and doing young 23-year-old boy stuff, which was a lot of fun because obviously I was coming from that Iron Apple kind of background. But I met a girl while I was there, and she was from Australia, and long story short, I ended up going to Australia at one point. And we went through a relationship and it was quite difficult and went through a breakup, and I bounced around the world a lot at this period. But to answer your question of when I started seriously considering that I need to do something as a...
Well, you know, you're thinking, how can I sustain this lifestyle? So how can I bring in money rather than just working in bars? How can you actually, because you've gone from that to being a graphic designer who's employed, you know, on Upwork as in the top 1 percentile of graphic designers on there. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's going to be a point where you started doing, because I remember at the start it was very kind of on and off doing little stuff for bars and small companies, and then it was like, right, I need to sit down and trying to put myself out there to actually attract.
Well, look, it's been quite up and down journey, to be honest, in regards to that. I could pinpoint a moment like this year where I was like, well, it's been several times actually. It's where I've really sat down and be like, okay, I need to get stuff together. And I have got stuff together, and then everything's fallen apart again. So it's like been very interesting. But there's been, like I said, moments in time. But I guess the quintessential moment would have been probably when I moved to Vietnam, I think.
Okay.
If I had to say that. I was working other jobs before this, but when I moved to Vietnam and I actually saw the potential of the digital nomad lifestyle and saw other people who were working online and remotely for the first time, I was like, wow, okay. Like, and I saw a country where like the cost of living was very cheap. I was like, and I'd always had an issue around money, and I wasn't very earning that much. But there, I was like, oh, actually, I can live off what I'm making, and I don't have to have a boss. I don't have to worry about this. I don't have to worry about that. So I was like, oh, okay. It was like, yeah, I'd say it was Vietnam.
So
when I
once
first
you
traveled
saw
to Vietnam.
people doing it successfully, and that gave you the vision to go, I can do this too.
Yeah, exactly. I think when I see somebody else is capable of doing something, that's kind of what inspired my online career in the first place. One of my friends, Matt Baker, he was working on this online platform, People Per Hour, and at the time I was looking for work in New Zealand. I was looking to be employed as a graphic designer because I need to make some money. I'd just left Australia. I was with my second Australian girlfriend at the time, actually. And I was trying to figure out what I should do, like in terms of, like, I was looking to work as a graphic designer again, because I was like, okay, this is probably what I'm going to get paid the most in. But nobody wanted to employ me based on the fact that they knew I was a backpacker and they knew I was going to be traveling, and they wanted to employ somebody for a few years. And they had this idea that I was just going to work for them a few months and quit, which is exactly what I was going to do. but I wasn't saying that. But in all fairness, they didn't want to employ me on that basis. And so I was like, okay, well, I need to do something. And I don't remember exactly how, but I ended up stumbling across People Per Hour. And I remember that my friend Matt Baker was working online as like a UX, UI designer for them. And when I clicked on his profile, he was like in the top 10 or top like 100 people on there. And I was like, no way. So then I'd always thought at that point, like that freelance platforms and those kind of online platforms, I kind of thought like maybe they were scams, or maybe it was like a bit of bullshit, or like, because there's certain online freelance platforms that I don't really align with. But People Per Hour seemed to make sense. And because I had a direct reference of one of my friends, I was like, okay, I'll speak to him. And then I was like, okay, well, if he can do it, I'll do it. And then I just started that online platform kind of work in New Zealand. And then not long after that, like about a month after I'd started, like actually that process started, and then me and my second girlfriend's relationship broke apart. But I'd already kind of had this vision of the future. Like I was so like...
Okay, what was that vision? Because this seems quite like a key part, because you've been exposed to something, you've seen a little bit of success, and then you've managed to get a point to go towards. Because up till now, you've not had that point to go towards.
Yeah. Okay. So say I had the vision before when I was like very stressed. You know, you were talking about like your life flashes forward to the future, and it's kind of, you get this kind of panicked and feared feeling. When I started working online, I was like for People Per Hour, like on their platform. I got my first few jobs in, and I'm working, like I'm doing a logo design for like £20 or something, just to get those first reviews in, because it's all about reviews on these platforms. But once I got them in, like say I got 3-4 reviews in, I got 3-4 different customers, and I was like, wait a second, like there's some momentum here. And I flashed forward, and it was like at the time, like I'd had so many different jobs in that recent little period, and I was always searching for jobs, always searching for the next opportunity. I was thinking, wow, I don't need to search. Like if I can make this work, I never have to search for another job again. I am like the source of my own income. And it just like the world kind of opened up to me. It was like, wow, wherever I go, I can work, and yada, yada, yada. I had this vision. Like I was like, I can do this. Like, and so I was like, okay, just put balls to the wall. And that's what I was going for, like I said. And then, but then everything fell apart very quickly afterwards. Just not in terms of like the career stuff, but just life stuff. So then I had a bit of a rocky start, but I always maintained the graphic design outside of all the chaos that was going in my life as well. So just for example, it's like me and my partner, ex-partner, broke up during that period. And then very shortly later, my granddad died, and I hadn't been back home in like 2 years. So I went back home for the funeral, and then I went to Portugal. And then spent 3 months in Portugal, and my friends asked me to go and do a road trip across America and across Canada and America. So we went to Canada and like bought an RV and then went traveling down through America. But the whole time, getting my graphic design career off the ground, like in terms of like this online platform.
Whilst you're on the move.
Yeah, whilst I'm on the move. So it was like, I would, like most people when they're, and I definitely would recommend this for most people, they will be working their standard jobs. So say they're working in an office, they're 9 to 5, they have their income taken care of already, and then they're starting to build their online freelance like profile on the side, so that they can just, they're not reliant upon it, but they're just slowly building on it when they can, week on week. Whereas I was like, that was all I was doing. It was like that was my life. It was like, that was how I was earning. That was the only way I was earning my income. So it was like I had so much pressure. I was taking on every single job that I could get in terms of, and like I wasn't just specializing in a very particular niche area. It was like I was designing menus, websites, logos, t-shirts, like album covers, like all kind, anything that was offering money. I was like, yes, okay, I'll do it.
So you just said, you'd recommend the other way of people working and doing it on the side, but I'd actually say the opposite. I'd say I think what's made you so good at that is that you've actually been forced to do it. And I think sometimes when you're in a position of comfort of a steady income and you don't decide it's not as serious, and something clicked to me as well a few minutes ago and I was like, wow. But you've been forced to do this on the go, okay? You're building and creating the world you're living in as you go, okay? When you've got this other world, which is the safe and secure position, it's much harder to do that. It's much harder to be dedicated to it the way your necessity to do it is what's driven you to be so successful at it.
Yeah, I agree to an extent, but I also feel like there's just on reflection, there was definitely, just in terms of the amount of stress I was experiencing, particularly when it comes to yeah, I was so stressed, dude. It's because I never knew if I was going to have next month's bills paid, like how I was going to, like it was like when the month began, I always like did everything by credit card, and I've always been pretty reasonable with money, but it was like, so say like if the month starts and I've got £1,000 worth of credit card bills from last month that need to be paid by the end of the month, I've got zero working. So during that period of time, that month, I'm like, okay, I've got to find £1,000 worth of work, and I've got to complete it like within that time period in order to get the money in my bank, in order to pay the credit card, in order to go into next month. And that was a cycle that I was constantly in for years, dude. Like, literally for years, actually.
I do remember we talked about this when you were in America. Like, I think San Francisco, remember you were doing a logo design for a prison or a hotel or something like that? It's like some kind of building, and it was based around the old prison.
Oh, it was Fort Point Payments.
Oh, okay.
But that was the interesting thing. What's very interesting when you're traveling, it was like I'd very regularly meet people like in backpackers hostels or like various things. Not so much when I was in the RV, but like when I get chatting to people that I do graphic design work for, and they became long-term clients. Like one of my friends, Eric, who lives in Los Angeles, we met at a hostel in San Diego, and we ended up going out to a party, and we decided that like on that night that we were going to go and watch Joe Rogan the next day at a comedy show. And we drove up to Los Angeles, watched Joe Rogan, and we ended up sleeping in his car outside his parents' house because his parents weren't in. So we just slept in like the car, and then, but he ended up becoming like a long-term friend and a long-term like client, because he messaged me the one day that he was starting a psychedelic brand and he needed some packaging for like the psychedelic mushroom company. And I'm like big in, like very passionate about the psychedelic industry. And he's also, and you know, he started like a cacao business. He makes his own cacao tea and all this different stuff. But I've worked in a very wide mix of areas. But knowing what I know now as a graphic designer and what leads to success now, if I would have been able to help myself so much back in the day, just because I was never able, like just having a cushion of cash behind you is very important just for managing your stress levels, and also ensuring that you don't feel the pressure of taking on work that you don't enjoy just for the money. And because I used to do a lot of that.
How long did it take for you to get to that point?
Well, see, like, dude, a long time, and it's not something that I'm proud of in a way, but it's also, I don't blame myself. It was just I went through life I went through this kind of career path in terms of like bumping my head on everything. It felt like it's only over the
I was like, it's not something you should be ashamed of though as well, because it's a journey. You know what I mean? Like it's this process, the journey, everything you've learnt from that now has got you to where you are today, where you are now in a bit more of a stable position where you've got that comfort with, you know, finances and the ability to now pick who you want to work with.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I just don't want to discourage anybody, because for me, like potentially the journey was maybe like 5 years, I'd say. And it was a lot of trial and error and a lot of mistakes and a lot of times where I thought I was going to quit. And every time I decided that I was going to quit, something random, weird sign from the universe would pop up, like where I was like, oh, for God's sakes.
Like,
so for instance, during COVID time, I was in Thailand. Well, just before COVID, I was in Thailand. Then I moved to Vietnam. COVID hit and everything crashed in the market. So I was like, I've always been kind of interested in investing, and I've just started making money via my graphic design at that point. So that was probably about 2 years after maybe 3 years after. I don't know time periods, 2.5 years, let's say, after I'd first originally started in New Zealand. I actually first started making money. So this, for instance, okay. Sorry, as I speak, I remember different times. So, for instance, first time I was thinking about like properly quitting my job was I'd gone to Thailand. I'd made it kind of like an intention. I'd realised that the way that I was working freelance as a graphic designer was stressing me out a lot, like particularly around America and various different things. So I went to Thailand. I was like, okay, I'm going to make it my intention to like actually like do this properly and make some money out of it. And it got round to like I think it was like my 29th birthday, my 28th birthday. And I decided to do something called figure funds. I have like I made an Excel sheet just to figure out how much money I had. And when I figured out how much money I had, I kind of had this idea in mind that I'd have at least a few grand. But I did the figuring out, and it was like I think I had like maybe like 800 or 700 pounds to my name. I was like, oh, for God's sake. And I was like, what am I doing, dude? And so I just was like super like angry and like just annoyed. I was like, well, I'm putting all this effort in and I'm getting nothing back. And I put like this post on Reddit, basically just venting about graphic design or whatever. And I was like, I'm a graphic designer and really struggling just to make ends meet, yada, yada, yada. And at the time, I think I was charging like maybe like 20 pounds an hour, 30 pounds an hour. It's very difficult to like figure out how to price yourself, or at least it was. And I put this post online. It was more like just a vent, just to get it off my chest or whatever. And I didn't expect anything to come of it. And it was around my birthday at the time, so I didn't check my phone for a few days. But when I went back online, like my post, it didn't go viral, but it got a lot of traction and a lot of people responded to it. And one guy in particular was like very adamant about me sending my portfolio and yada, yada, yada. So I did. I sent him my portfolio and like he said he was going to send me back some advice or something. I didn't really expect too much. This guy ends up sending me back like a 4-5 stage business plan, like tailoring it to exactly what I should be doing, how much I should be charging, like all this kind of stuff. And it turned out to be a guy who had worked as a creative director. He'd studied at like one of the top colleges in universities of America. And so I was like I was super grateful. And also on that same post, somebody had commented saying that like basically they were in need of a graphic designer who specialized in fashion and apparel design, because that's what my portfolio was built up of because of my time at that junior graphic designer role at the fashion company. So I decided to go down that route. Oh no, sorry. So I ended up doing work for that guy, and because I just had the advice from this business plan of how much I should be charging, I literally directly applied that to the quote for the hat company. They hired me to do free caps for them, free cap designs, and I did those, and the client was super happy that they ordered, I think it was 17 more, like in one bulk. Individual designs, which I ended up charging like a few $1,000s for. And then once I finished those, they ended up ordering another 15 more, which was another few $1,000s. So I was like, boom, it was like instant reward. Like I'd gone from instantly having nothing to instantly having a few grand in the bank. I was like, oh, wow, like it's working. I'm doing the thing that I set out to do. I'm like, yes. And I was so grateful for the dude. But it was almost like the perfect storm, because during that time period, COVID had hit. And I've just got my first, like, starting to get my first paychecks, and like the cryptocurrency market had crashed, and I'd believed in cryptocurrency for a while. So I started investing in Bitcoin and Ethereum when it's like Bitcoin was down to like $3,000 and Ethereum was down to like $88 when I first started investing. So I'm putting my money into that. Like, I'm being very cautious about it because I've only just started getting money for like one of the first times in a long time. So I started doing that, and during that time period, during COVID, I'm just working out, doing work and investing my money into crypto, and everything starts taking off. Money starts going wild, but I wasn't taking any profits. And it reached the point where I was like, okay, I could probably potentially like quit. Like, I could maybe just quit doing this graphic design stuff and start just fully going into crypto. I had no like prior experience. And when I'd started to think like that, it wasn't very long after that the market crashed. I hadn't took anything out. Like, all kinds of like disasters hit. And then I was back home. Then I ended up leaving Vietnam and like turned up back home, and I was just very miserable and depressed because I'd lost kind of everything, and was like, graphic design was still there, but I'd almost built like this resentment towards it, even though it wasn't necessarily graphic design's kind of fault at all.
So let's jump in now. I think it's appropriate time about your relationship with mental health as well, and the stress. Obviously, you've talked about being extremely stressed when you're starting out and trying to figure out how to survive. But you know, when you have these ups and downs, because inevitably they happen when you are in this kind of position, you know, how do you pick yourself back up? And maybe to start with, what really are you thinking in terms of like yourself, like appreciation of yourself? Because what you've done is you've broken out of the mold of what, let's say, the Western society has said to get a job. You've done the school, you've done the university, you got a job. You've gone, fuck that, I'm not doing that. I'm going to build my life and create my life. You spent 2.5 years traveling. You found an area where you can make money, which is consistent through online graphic design consultancy services, basically. Mm-hmm. You've built it up once. It's crashed. You lose majority of your money. Mm-hmm. So what I asked was the battle with mental health. How do you keep going? How do you not just go, fuck this shit, I'm stopping, I'm going to go back to the normal reality, or worse?
Okay, well, that thought definitely gets considered. I mean, in terms of like going back to like normal reality, getting a regular job, doing the normal things. And at the time I'd gone back after the COVID crash. Well, after I'd lost all my money in crypto, basically, after working super hard to try and get it in the first place. I went back to the UK, and I was back at my parents' place, feeling like a failure actually, because I'm like, God damn it, like I'm always finding my parents when I'm stressed or something, or like when life's not going too good. And everybody like looks at my life like, oh, he's traveling, he's doing all these amazing things. And I have been, and I am, but a lot of that time, especially during like trying to get a career sorted online, it's been like so difficult. And now after all that hard work and actually getting somewhere with it, I've just put all of this money into that. I've been working, like all of this time that I've allocated to this, and I've put it into like this asset that is very volatile, and feeling like a genius for a little bit, but then also like, oh no, I've done exactly what I shouldn't have done, like, and it's all fallen apart. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, I felt so terrible, dude. And then I'm back home with my parents, and all of my other friends who had stayed home have got houses and careers and wives and kids, and here's Jordan just turning back over home, depressed in his like childhood bedroom, like with nothing to show for it almost. Even though I've got a ton of memories, it feels like that at the time.
Is that what happens when you kind of break, I guess, from that momentum? It's like when you're not constantly striving and looking for that next thing and doing it, and you've kind of stopped in that momentum, you're back in the UK. Do you feel like a level of self-consciousness that people are going, he's back, he's failed?
Yeah, a little bit. I feel like a bit of judgment. It's like, I don't like to admit it, but I think it's the case for a lot of people, if not everybody, to a degree. It's like, I feel like my sense of self-worth was definitely wrapped up in my income, or like the amount of money that I had, or it's like I feel like there's a lot of pressure in the West in particular. Like there's a lot of like beauty standards that are like pushed onto women. But I think with men there's a lot of like success standards. It's like if you see what's pushed to men on like the front of magazines, it's fast cars, watches, suits, like all like rich and like wealth and success. And so it's hard to not compare myself to that. I feel like as well at the same degree, it's like I am very aware of my own potential inside of it, as we all are. It's like, and we know when we're not living up to it. And it was like, I've always felt like I can be a successful individual and I'm capable of achieving a lot. It depends on what way you want to measure success. But yeah, that was very difficult to deal with, to be putting all the work in it to just fall apart. And so I had to go through a bit of a period of time where I really just was just like thinking about what I was doing, and if I was going to give it another go with this graphic design stuff, or if I was going to just quit completely.
What were you going to do if you quit?
Anything, dude. I was like,
You were looking for stability.
I was craving it. So let's just put it in perspective. So I've had various dealings with mental health issues since that initial relationship when I first went to Australia. But that's a bit of like, I don't know, that would take us off topic for the time being. So just to bring it back, when I returned to the UK after losing my money in crypto, a lot of those old inner demons were rising up to the surface. A lot of like self-criticism, self-hate, because it's like I'm the one who made all the decisions. I was the one who was responsible for making the decisions to get myself the money in the first place, which is a positive thing. But I was also the person who was responsible for the decisions that ended up with me losing all the money. And so it's like very easy to just like, I had a very like self-hate narrative running through me. And because I was back at home in England, in a place, my hometown of Tipton, where all of my friends have their own lives and different stuff, I felt very isolated. So it's just me ruminating in my own head for a while. And I've always had a very particular like mental health routine to a degree. I know my relationship to my mental health, or like the more negative aspects of the inner emotions that we experience, is like I treat them like alarm bells or like a radar to indicate that something's going wrong. And all of my issues, well, a lot of my issues in life have always come when I've ignored or suppressed those feelings and tried to like not acknowledge them. And when you do that, they'll just bubble up until they reach a point where you can't ignore them anymore. Same with the itching, like anxiety. I'd allow it to reach a point like where like I can't ignore it. It's a common occurrence that runs through my life. It's like I'll always wait until things get too bad that I can't ignore them anymore, that I have to do something about it.
Chris Williamson talks about it. It's like it's exactly in this kind of metaphor of work. Like, if something's not bad enough for you to make a change, you'll live with it until it becomes bad enough. So whether it's work, you hate your job, but actually it pays the bills, it allows you to have fun on the weekends, or if it's a relationship which it isn't great, but you know, better than being on my own. If it's not bad enough, it won't force you to change. And like, that's a very common thing. Like, sometimes people need it to be so extreme for them to take action.
Yeah.
They're willing to go 25 years of mediocre and not getting anything back because it's safer.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's interesting way of.
He has a name for it. I forgot what the name is.
Yeah, I think I've seen the video that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Actually. But yeah, so back home, feeling like a bit of a failure.
So how do you build yourself back up then? So you've got down to your these things. There's a lot of self-criticism, a lot of self-doubting. You know, how do you prepare yourself to go, right, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to go again, and I'm going to jump back on. I'm going to have another crack at the whip.
So it takes time, and it takes a lot of reflecting, and also just a lot of doing the things that you know are good for you, even though they're difficult. Such as like, just, okay, so you analyze your life and you're like, okay, what can I do in this moment that's going to be good for me? That no matter how simple it is, whether that just be like taking a shower, brushing your teeth, eating good, yada yada yada. There are the things in my direct control. Going for a run, exercise. I've always been very good at like, it's almost like I have to do these things. It's like I have to run, I have to exercise, because like I was speaking about earlier, it's like if I don't exercise, I get brain fog or whatever. It's almost like the body sends signals that get me to perform a certain action in order to operate better. So it's like the negative experience leads to the positive action. So I listen to a lot of podcasts, I reflect a lot, I journal a lot. I've always been quite fascinated with the mind and how it works, particularly after my own like dealings with like my first like mental health like crisis, I guess, or whatever you want to call it, like back when I was like 23 years old. Up until that point, life had been very smooth, but when that kind of happened, it was very interesting for me to watch my own mind, because I was like, wait a second, like I've always been quite self-analytical. And when I was going through this experience of like real deep, like mental
criticisms,
mental trauma, just mental health issues, basically. There was always an aspect of myself where I was like just writing down, like it was like there was a doctor in my mind, or like the analyst in my mind, just writing down like what it was experiencing. It was like, well, this is strange, like, because I developed loads of weird like stuff. Like I developed like a level of Tourette's. Like I had like anxiety to the utmost degree. I was extremely depressed. I was dealing with like suicidal thoughts for the first time. It was like all of this shit, like oh man, it was so wild. But I managed to pull myself out of that, like, and I've done it several times actually. So it's like once you do something enough, it's like the brain has a way of like convincing you stuff's going to be forever, or everything's going to be terrible for the rest of your life. And that's what, like, if we talk about suicide to a degree, that's what it is. It's like it's a permanent decision based on temporary emotions. But the brain can be very convincing. It can convince you, look, it's it, it's over, like you're messed up forever. And the only job you got to do is just to acknowledge that your thoughts can be wrong. And this is one way that I kind of, like, there's been many ways that I've like reasoned with myself, but one way that really helped me, which is kind of sounds counterproductive, but it worked, because I had such a low opinion of myself and thought I was such a terrible person, and that I should be like, I don't like that I should like leave this planet, or like shouldn't exist anymore, whatever you want to call it. I asked myself this question. I was like, okay, say if I had the 100 closest people to me in this room, and the people that I respect the most, the people who I love the most, and I asked them the question like about what they thought about me, like whether they thought I should carry on living, all this kind of stuff. Like the obvious answer out of all these people that I respect and admire would be yes, like Jordan's yada yada yada, like all these good things, these good words. And then I compared what I was saying to myself, like to these 100 people, and I was like, okay, well, does my opinion of myself outweigh the 100 people that I love and respect the most? And the answer to that was no. But also, it's like acknowledging that my opinion of myself can be wrong.
That's what I want to really, really stick on, because that is so powerful. Like that is so powerful, because we are in a constant dialogue with ourselves, telling ourselves a story which we think is right. How often do you challenge your mind? How often do you challenge? I mean, how often? Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
How often do you challenge your mind? And I think this is honestly, it's a fucking good point. Like, acknowledging that you're wrong in your mind sometimes takes away some of the pressure.
And what was good about it was because it was already okay. So my narrative that was running through my mind was like, Jordan, you're the biggest idiot in the world. You're a fuck up, all this kind of shit. But if I'm actually like thinking I'm an idiot and I'm a fuck up, and that's correct, then also me being wrong about my opinion of myself is also correct, which directly like contradicts the words that I'm saying. So the word, like, if I'm such a shit person, then maybe the opinions of my own opinion of myself can also be incorrect. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of like a weird like mess where I was like, oh, well, maybe I'm wrong, because that would match the narrative that I've got of myself.
I mean, what are you comparing yourself to being wrong to is the other question I'd say. Because this is another thing. It's like, you're wrong to what? No answer.
No, I'm trying to think.
Can I throw another thing in there?
Yeah, go for it.
I think the biggest cause, and I said it a few times, I think the biggest cause of stress, anxiety, depression, mental health problems is the expectations we set on ourselves for how we think we should live our lives and how we should be and what we should achieve. I think once you get rid of your expectations and you just live life to experience life in the good and the bad, to experience life as a good graphic designer and a bad graphic designer, and a graphic designer trying to figure out how to make money as a graphic designer while he's traveling the world. That's life. Not, shit, I'm not a graphic designer who's making thousands of pounds, I'm living in an amazing villa in the middle of Thailand. Like, you know, that's the thing. So what were you comparing yourself to? What was it that you failed to achieve? Which is why you're a failure.
To be honest, the only thing I can think that I was comparing myself to was my own potential.
So what does your own potential see, though?
I've always had like a very high... What does it see? Like, it sees myself as like a high achiever, like somebody who is successful, like somebody, I don't know, it's like I feel like there's so many things that I'm capable of.
What's your relationship with success?
What's my relationship with success? In what regard? Like, how do I see success?
How do you see success? What does it mean to you?
Well, see, it changes over the years, but now I relate to success in the terms of like it's basically somebody who finds contentment in what they do on a daily basis, I guess.
So what does it mean to you? We've gone deep.
Yeah, I know. It's coffee and tea. What does it mean to me in relation to me?
In the same relationship as you said,
it's like, okay, well, it's when I feel alive, dude, and that's when sometimes I feel out of alignment or in alignment. It's like traveling now, coming to see you in London. I was in Chiang Mai on the weekend, and I'm going to be go visit my parents on holiday, and also go up to Chester. And there's something like that feels like this is what I'm supposed to be doing, like going on these adventures and going to meet these people, and that success to me is those people that have kind of
for you though it's living as you said, it's living your life.
Yeah, it's traveling to the beat of my own drum, I guess, in terms of not okay, it's difficult, that's what I mean. I feel like I'm split into two parts sometimes.
Okay.
I feel like I've got the part of me that relates success to stability, security, having a place to call home, having a steady and reliable income, and good relationships and routine. But then there's another part of me that says success is living life in a way where it's you're just following, you're just dancing to the music almost. It's you're following the natural flow, you're
experiencing.
You're experiencing, but it doesn't matter about these fears of okay, I need to be earning a certain amount of money, or how am I going to get this, or how this safety or something. It's just okay, I'm just going to listen to my own intuition and my gut and just go with that.
When you're in your best flow, okay, in your best place, your work's going well, etc., what's kind of your driver? Are you driven? You've heard the experiment Jordan Peterson talked about with the rats with a spring on a tail. They put food in front of it to see the tension in the spring, and then they put the smell of a cat behind it to see the tension in the spring, to garner whether the motivation is to run away from the rat or to eat the food. So for you, when you're in your, because I know what the answer will be when you're in your bad state, but in a best state, what is your driver to success and to moving forward and to trying to be happy and live your life? What's the thing pushing you, or what are you running away from? Because it could be that as well.
When I'm on best state, I don't feel like it's running away necessarily. It's more my relationship to life and just kind of my personal belief, I guess, in why we're here and what we're supposed to do. But it's I feel just to give a spiritual perspective on this of where my spiritual beliefs lie, it's I almost feel before we're born, we're individual souls that choose a certain vehicle during this lifetime to, I don't know whether you want to call it learn lessons or to have experiences that transcend this kind of reality that we live in, and I don't have a various experience in future realms. It's hard for me to
I get it. I know
word the words, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And so my driver is basically to just try and be the best version. So it's very cliche. It feels like it's overused, but it's almost trying to be the best possible version of this human I can be in this lifetime, and be as true to this individual as I can, and try and let go and shed those things that hold me back from that inner expression of what I know to be true to me. It's when you want to say something, or you feel something's important, but you don't say it, or you don't share it, or you don't do anything about it. So we all have those inner voices, or those inner dialogues, or those inner feelings. That's our deep inner knowing of okay, this is calling you to towards who you're supposed to be. So that, like, I'm just trying to be the best me I can in this life. And because I believe that when we do that, it's like we fit into this like overarching machine. We become the cog in the machine of like existence that can't quite explain why, but it's like I want to just try and I guess be of, I don't know if be of service is the right term, but just be there, like just to be there in existence, like as this person, like as the embodiment of like who I truly am, to like know that my words that I'm speaking match the person who I feel I am. It's like we know sometimes when we say things that, do I actually mean that? Is that actually true to what I say? Am I just saying that to impress a certain person in the room or to come across in a certain way? It's like
conditionally say things.
To just try and live in alignment to who I am and have trust that when I do that, I'm going to end up in the place that I'm supposed to be, doing the things I'm supposed to do, interacting with the people I'm supposed to meet, and then riding the fucking wave of like this ocean that we call fucking life. You know what I mean? That sounded very fucking profound, but you know that.
No, I liked it.
I'm just trying to say
it's true, and it's really easy to kind of like.
And so that's my motivator. I guess it's like I have like this.
I mean, do you have an element of you which is like I can't be going back to Tipton? Are you running away from the kind of the life are you still running away from the life you ran away from at the beginning? Because at the start of this journey, you're running away from the mundane, and now you've found yourself in a position of, I've got a really good balance now, and I've got stability in who I am and what I'm doing and the life I can live, but I got to either maintain it to make sure I don't go back, or maintain it because I can see where this is going to go further.
So it's never, to be honest, it's never really been about Tipton. I mean, look, Tipton, just to put in perspective, is like, it's voted one of the worst areas to live in the UK. A lot of crime, like a lot of like various different things that make it not the best place in the world. And but to be fair, when you grow up in a place, like that's your version of normal. So I had nothing to compare it to. So but I mean that was normal. It's like we grew up throwing, I always use this as a point, but we literally did have brick fights when we were kids. So we'd get two teams of people and we'd throw rocks at each other from a distance for fun. And we'd probably only stop throwing rocks at each other when somebody got hurt. That was like when the game was over. It was like, somebody's bleeding, but let's stop. Or whatever. Honestly, we used to, and we'd play in abandoned factories and we'd do all this kind of stuff. So it was never so much about Tipton. There's an argument for the case. You know the phrase, it's better to have loved and lost than never loved at all. There's an argument actually that it's better to have never loved and all than to have loved and lost, because you've never experienced it, so you never know what you're missing out on. So it's like, for instance, I knew I was kind of buggered, I don't know if that's the right word, but I knew I was kind of like, I was like, shit, I've opened the Pandora's box or whatever. The first time I went to Melbourne in Australia, and I kind of had the experience of what Western life could be, because I was walking across a park in Melbourne, and it was a beautiful day. The sky was blue, grass was green and all trimmed, and this beautiful park in like this suburb. And I saw this kid, and he was like playing on the swing, just running around, having a good time. He's only like 5 years old. And I was watching this kid, and I was thinking, wow, I was like, this is this kid's life. Like this is going to be like his version of normal. Like this is going to be like what he experiences. And then I was like, started thinking about my own childhood. I was thinking, wait a second, like I used to grow up on like a park with like abandoned cars that were burnt out, and there's like cans of beer like everywhere, and there's like trolleys like thrown in the canal, like there's lots of canals by me, and like there's always gangs of kids like trying to give you aggro, or like trying to rob you or trying to do something. And I was like, wait a second, I was like, maybe my childhood wasn't as amazing as I thought, but it's like, it definitely was. It's still amazing, but it's like, because it's your version of normal and you have nothing to compare it to, when you actually step out, I always describe it as like the fishbowl analogy. We grow up in a fishbowl. We know the inner walls of the fishbowl. We know the different objects, the different nature, the different rocks, whatever you want to call it. That's your version of normal. Now, when you leave and you go travel, it's like somebody comes along with a net. They're like, okay, I'm taking you out the fishbowl. I'm going to go drop you in this big lake over here called the rest of the world or whatever. For me, it was Australia. And it was like, okay, now I'm swimming in this whole giant lake. I can go anywhere. There's all these new tropical good-looking fish that I can go and talk to or chat
So
to.
are they women?
It can be whatever you want. I'll leave it open to imagination. And there's beautiful, it's like you can swim anywhere, and this like all different stuff, and it's like amazing. It's like, oh my God, all this new experience, you know what I mean? Like, kind of like I said, dog head out the window, that kind of just feeling. It's like, it feels for me, it's like so good for my brain. It's almost like my brain is designed to have those experiences. It's when it feels the most open, it's when it feels the most free, it's when I'm most in line with who I feel I am. Then along comes the guy with the net, whoever you want to call that. They picked me back up out the lake, put me back in the fishbowl. Now, prior to that, I only knew the walls of the fishbowl, but now I've got all these new experiences, and I'm trying to talk to the people who are still in the fishbowl about the lake that's out there. I'm like, yo, like there's this lake and there's all this and da da da. But I can't connect with any of them because they've never had that experience to be able to.
They've never left the fishbowl.
They've never left the fishbowl. So it's like, that's when I was like, oh shit. Now I'm buggered because it's like, there's, I think
now you know how good it can be.
Well, exactly. Well, it's like, say, for instance, I've heard this used before, but it's like, say if my average happiness in Tipton, let's just call it, out of 10, it's a 5, because it's like, that's your version of normal. And 5 is not bad, it's not good, it's just, that's normal. And after you've left, and now you're, like, say your version of normal life in Australia, because it was like, oh, it's a 7 or 8, or maybe even a 9 when I first get there.
Yeah.
And then after you've been there for a while, it slowly starts becoming your normal, tapers down to like a 5 or whatever. So that becomes your new version of normal. Like what was a 9 now becomes a 5. Then you go back to Tipton and you got all this comparison to. Now Tipton's down at a 3 or whatever because you know what's already out there. So now like that, what used to be a 5 is now a 3. So now you're like, oh, bugger, like you already know what exists. And I think that almost is like a bit of the traveller's curse, because it's like I said, when I moved to Pi, and I love Pi, like I love it so much. But it's like after a certain amount of time, I think that's almost, it might be even the curse of being a human. It's like what starts off as like a 9 or 10, it's like, okay, for instance, when people get married, it's like nobody goes into marriage, well, I get, maybe they do, but for the most part, you go into marriage with this human being because you love them. You want to dedicate your life to them. You want to, like, you see them as this amazing thing. But after being with them for a while, you start taking something for granted. Like, it becomes normal. And you lose that novelty factor. You lose that kind of, like, that wonder, that awe of what attracted you in that wow of what attracted you to them in the first place. And you start getting bored and looking elsewhere. And that's, I hate that sometimes, because it's like, it's just, I think sometimes we need to take a break from things to realise what we've got. And that's why I like returning to England sometimes. It's like, as going back to Tipton now, it's going to be a really good experience for me. It's like, I'm going to be there, but I know at any point I can go back to Thailand. And that's what makes it better. When I came back during COVID time, after I'd lost all my money, well, just after COVID, I didn't know when I'd be able to return travelling again because I had nothing. And that made it a lot more of a difficult experience. Whereas now it's like, I'm choosing to be in Tipton. It's not like I'm forced to be there. So because I've got that choice, it's like the experience to enjoy it more is like...
You can actually live in the moment in Tipton. You can actually be there present with people because you've got that reassurance of your return.
Yeah, and not feeling like a failure anymore. Because, like to finish off the point that we were making earlier, it's like I've actually managed this year to like make my graphic design business pretty successful. To a degree.
Extremely.
Yeah.
And you've got consistent clients paying you at an hourly rate, which is most you've ever probably been paid.
Yeah.
You know, and you've got that kind of reputation now. You've moved to Upwork, so you've got a reputation on that, which has set you up to be able to live and work anywhere in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is the part which, and it's one of the reasons why I wanted to get on, was because without hearing your story, from hearing just the glossy parts of it, you live a life that a lot of people who are younger look out for and go, I want to travel the world and work for myself. I want to have that. And that is so kind of like shallow in its depth of what it actually means to do that. But it's so rewarding as well. So it's like your journey to getting to where you are now, you've gone through shit. You've gone through the mud, you know, and you've got yourself out to a position now where actually you're starting to see this is a real kind of like stability for you.
Yeah, it's like the fruits of your labour. It's like, that's another human thing. It's like we all It's like, you know, that picture that we've all seen of like the peak of the iceberg or whatever, and then you see all the stuff below it. It's like we always focus on that. It's like we see people in like a position of like that we desire to get there or whatever, but we don't see that the work that they've put in to get there. It's like I always remember that people talk about like Floyd Mayweather or Mike Tyson or whoever, like these boxers, and they're like, oh, you got paid this much per second or you got paid this much per minute for fight. I'm like, technically, you can say that because you got paid for that particular fight, but you're not counting all of the hours that he's put in at the gym. Like, it sacrifices his entire childhood, his teenage years. He's like not going to parties. He's waking up 4 o'clock in the morning to go for runs and yada, yada, yada. It's like, you weren't getting paid at that time.
Exactly.
You're paying for that. You're paying for the entire experience. Exactly. Like, yeah, like in order to become a person like Mike Tyson or like to become that kind of style, it's like you look at these like parents, look at these difficult childhood where like I think his dad was killed very early on, his mum was a prostitute, all that kind of stuff. It's like, do you still want to be that person? If that means in order to be that person, you've got to have that childhood where you're abused, you're bullied, because that's what it takes. And it's like the difficulties that you experience and what pushes you. Like, I mean, it's like...
Well, in that case, the drivers are running away from the thing they had from behind. They're running towards that end person, but they're running away from that past.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's like some of the most interesting people, or the most interesting people that you meet are the ones that have been through the most difficulties in life or something. It's like say David Goggins, for instance. He's like, because of his difficult past, I really want to just get that across. It's like, negative experience for them, like to a degree, depending on how you look at it, but negative feelings can really lead to positive action. You can use them as fuel. It's like you don't need to see them as negative per se. It's like those feelings that are horrible, it's almost like they're the gas that fuels the change. You know what I mean? Because if you didn't have that negative emotion, you never... change the situation.
And also, I think a lot of people see it as like that negativity is going backwards, and changing. In some of the groups I was in before, like we're talking about this kind of stuff, I always used to say to these people who are like, "Oh, my life's going backwards. Like I'm stuck." I was like, "You're never going backwards because time's going forward.
Yeah.
All that's happened is you've plateaued. So when are you going to rise up again? You're still going forward, you're just on the same level. Then you go up again and you plateau and you go up again and you plateau.
Exactly. Well, one thing I really like, the way that I looked at that, because I had a pretty similar realization this year, it's like sometimes we do feel like we're going backwards, but it's almost like we're spiraling forwards. So it's like it's hard to like communicate this through a microphone, but like what would you describe that shape? Kind of like a swirl.
A swirl, yeah.
Yeah, but it's like a swirl that's moving forwards with momentum, but then at one point it starts going backwards on itself. And you feel like you're going backwards, but you're never going backwards as far as you was before, because you're always...
You've still got momentum going forward.
As soon as you've reached the furthest point backwards, where you feel like you're really losing momentum, that's when you start moving forwards usually. And it just keeps going like that. That just seems to be the journey of life for me. Particularly, it just feels like you're always going to feel like that at some stage, no matter how much success you've made. Like, I really do like take on board when I listen to a lot of like these like podcasters, like say Theo Vaughn or people who have the quintessential things that you would layer as success. A lot of these people still feel like they haven't made it or whatever. This is it's those negative feelings that keep pushing us to 100%. And in a way, it can be a bit of a... I'm not exactly saying that's like a positive thing, but there is definitely positive qualities to it.
People shouldn't be scared to fail, basically, is the point of it, really, because failure is what actually teaches you the biggest lessons and actually helps you really drive on to the next step.
Yeah. And also to sometimes be thankful for like, it's like, you know, I was talking about like in Pi, I was feeling a bit like, I don't know, it's easy to beat myself up about like feeling like ungrateful or negative, because it's like, oh, my life's so good at different things. But I like, instead of being ungrateful, it's like I've started to just accept the feelings in the moment. Like, oh wow, so I feel a little bit ungrateful or a little bit tired or a little bit just over this, even though my life's really good. I just feel like a bit over it, and that's just because the certain amount of time period has passed where my body's like, okay, let's do something different. And I enjoy that aspect of myself of just like, okay, let's jump into something new. Let's go have a new experience. Let's go to a different place. Because now I'm experiencing stuff like this. Like I'm coming back home. I'm visiting you. I'm going to go see different people. And it's like, okay, sweet. So,
cool. Okay, next question. Are you a long-term or short-term thinker?
Okay, I was speaking to my ex-partner about this the other day, actually. Because when I've been in a place of like really not having money or finances on under control, it's very difficult to think on the long term. Because she was mentioning she's been going through something very similar, like struggling with finances, and like people have told her specifically that she thinks very short term. But it's difficult to think long term when you when you don't even know you're going to pay the bills next month. You know what I mean? It's difficult to have that kind of like clarity of like that. It's difficult to make a 5-year plan. Yeah, when you don't know how you're going to buy your vegetables next month or whatever.
I respect that.
So for the periods where I've been a bit under the pump cash wise, yeah, I've been short term. But now I'm starting to form the basis and form that financial stability that I've been craving for so long. Now I'm like, oh, I'm already making like years like plans in terms of like travel plans. Like now I'm already thinking, okay, I can go back to Pi from September till February, then I come back, or I either travel for a little bit and then come back and do the Camino de Santiago with you, and then travel Europe for a little bit, then go back to Thailand, then go to Australia, then maybe go to America and do Burning Man and like Yosemite and Redwoods. And it's like, okay, I can start to formulate these things. And because I've had the relationship of losing all my money before, it's also like, okay, I know what mistakes I made. I'm definitely the kind of person who learns by making the mistakes, rather than sometimes it's like you can get told a piece of advice like, oh, you shouldn't do this because this will happen. It's like, yeah, I'll listen to that and take it on board, but I'm the kind of person for the most part who's had to go like, okay, I need to make the mistake in order to learn from it, even though I know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so saying now, I'm starting to become more of a long-term thinker, but I'm always open to change.
I think it's a very fair point as well about stability helps you, because, you know, from my point of view, I always say I'm quite a long term, but I also have stability in my life, so I can be.
Yeah, of course.
And I think that makes so much sense. Okay, so after everything you've gone through and where you are so far, what's the one thing you would like to tell your parents about this? Would you have anything you would say to them?
I just want to but I'm going to be telling them anyway. I'm very open with my parents now, which is good. But I just tell them I'm super grateful. And it's also, they've never really put any pressure on me to be successful. And that's maybe why I thought about this a lot as well. Like this inner critic that I developed, because I was speaking to a girl in Pi recently, Linda. She had a very difficult childhood. She was like from Belarus, and her mum was very critical of her. And so she developed this inner critic, like, which was very mean and very horrible to her on the inside. And we relied on that because I also had that. But I never got it from my parents. My parents were never very cool. They were always very loving, very open, like I said, like wanting me to do whatever I wanted to do. But apparently after going to therapy and speaking to people, it's like, because I was craving direction so much and craving like kind of like this strict parental guidance in a way, which is like, okay, do this, do that, do that. It's almost like I developed this inner narrative to a degree. So just to go back to the question of like, what do I want to say to my parents? I'm really grateful that they were just like never, like, even though I developed that kind of aspect of myself, when I really do, I'm honest with myself, would I have really wanted a parent that's like, you need to be a doctor, you need to be a dentist, you need to be a lawyer? Would I have wanted that? No, not at all. I want, as difficult as it's been in a way to kind of like try and figure out life. I made a university, I remember making an artwork in university of like, this guy looking at a lamppost, a signpost with all these different directions and not knowing which one to take, because that's exactly what I felt for a large part of my life, just really not knowing what direction to go in. But because of that, because of the not knowing, it means I've explored a lot of different avenues, and it's almost like it's sometimes more difficult to know what you want to do than what you don't want to do. You know,
100%. I spent about 4 years trying to figure out what I wanted to do and realizing what I don't want to do.
Exactly. So it's like that's usually more clear. So say for instance, when I actually went and did the career work in the graphic designer, it was like, okay, you don't want to do this. You know what I mean? It's like boom, instant on it. So it's like almost like trial and error. And now I've actually figured out like all these different avenues of potential life, career paths, or things that I can go down that would potentially lead to a feeling of fulfillment. Not going to really know for sure until I actually go down those paths and actually go into those kind of lifestyles. But at least I have a wide array of directions that I can take my life in which all lead to a feeling of like kind of like hope and optimism. So I'm like, sweet, I'm just waiting for the doors or like seeing what opportunities present themselves. And if one of them presents themselves that leads in a particular direction, then I'll just go down that. It's like I'm just staying open to ideas. Yeah. So it's like the way that I did that was basically just listing out my passions, the things I'm passionate about, and the things that I'm naturally skilled at, and then seeing how they overlay one another and which kind of career paths would fit them.
With your parents' kind of freedom they gave you, it gave you the ability to be your own parent.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying, because now you've got that structure and actually the guidance you were craving, you've given yourself through the experiences you've been through.
Well, it reaches the point. So it's like, okay, my parents were very open to me doing what I wanted to do. And it was very early on that I started living a life that they hadn't lived before. And that's kind of where we experience almost like a step into adulthood. But what I realised, and what was kind of scary as well, was because I was living quite a different lifestyle to what my parents had lived. Like my dad, like I said, had worked from 16 until 62 in the same job. And my mum, she'd worked a range of different jobs for her career, but pretty much just your traditional kind of like English parents, working class style of life. And I was like the son who was like going off traveling and doing all this wild stuff. And when I went through my first, like I said, like real difficult experience of like a first relationship I was in, it was really just, there was lots of aspects that were very difficult to deal with. And everything kind of fell apart at one point. I was trying to speak to my parents about advice about what I should do, where I should go, what I should, what I should be doing. And I realised that they couldn't really give me advice because they'd never done the things that I'd done before. So I was like, oh, wait a second. They don't know, like these people that I've always gone through my entire life for like guidance or for perspectives, they can't really help me in this situation because they've never experienced it, so they can't really give advice from this angle.
Is that liberating or scary?
Well, at the time it was scary, but it was also liberating. It's like, oh, bugger, like the responsibility of this situation falls onto me. It's like, I'm the one who's got to figure this out. Now, I didn't do a very good job of figuring it out at the time. Like I said, it does feel like I've gone through life a lot, bumping my head off different things, but I always make it through. But yeah, it was a turning point for me for sure. Of being like, okay, I am the orchestrator of what this is going to be. Put a lot of responsibility on my own autonomy, I guess.
Yeah.
That's the right way of putting it.
I understand it. Okay. What do you reckon the keys are to succeeding or following your dreams and building a career, a lifestyle for what you want to live?
Okay. So I believe the keys are first of all, you got to figure out who you are. Like, really. It's like we have an idea of who we are, but I think a lot of us are going through life like actually not really having an idea of who this person is that we embody. And like I said, it's like sense spiritual, but it's like the reason we can have a disagreement with ourselves, or the reason we can not like ourselves, or the reason we can have inner conflict is because there's almost has to be two sides of the coin. For to have inner conflict, that is what it is. There has to be one perspective and another perspective that don't agree with one another. And I personally believe that we each have our own individual space in this earth and this lifestyle. And the key is to figuring out who you are to the utmost degree, really doing some soul searching, really figuring out if what you're doing is what you want to be doing, trying to listen to that inner voice that you might have been suppressing or whatever. And those interests and those intrigues that you can't quite explain, but there's something about it that's calling you towards it. That's kind of how we figure it out. It's by listening to that voice. Like, say, there's always been some... I
was going to say, how do people really know how to connect and listen to that voice, though? Because I would partially argue that a lot of people don't know how to listen to it. What is it they're listening for?
It doesn't have to be anything too crazy sometimes, but it's usually the things that constantly repeat themselves, that are constantly there, like that. Obviously, we all have fleeting thoughts every now and then, but there's usually an ongoing narrative of like the same message kind of keeps coming up over and over and over again. This is coming from a person. I'm very good at suppressing and ignoring things. Like I said, I'll wait until everything's on fire before I'm like, okay, actually, I should probably leave or whatever. You know what I mean? I'm like, wow, I should probably do something about this. It's like, but it's like the same messages keep popping up, and we can only ignore them for so long. And I just think it's like trying to come into like communication and some kind of relationship with the body that I really feel like there's this I can't think of the right word, but like there's this like whole movement, I guess, that is trying to push this idea that as human beings we shouldn't experience like negative emotion. Like, whereas I'm like to fall on the side of like that negative feelings and negative emotion are actually a good thing. It's like feeling anxious, feeling depressed, feeling these difficult qualities are actually signs of our body telling us, yo, you're doing something wrong. You know what I mean? Like we want to be out in the field. We want to be learning to play music. We want to be doing all these different things. But it's like we fall under this societal pressure that's pushed onto us in school or wherever, however you've learned it, of these ideas of what you think you should be doing. But then the body's like, no, like okay, we're going to do a 9 to 5 that we're not really passionate about, and we're driving an hour to work and driving an hour and a half back, and we're doing these things. The logical side of the mind is running the show. And then when you're not listening to like, okay, maybe I was getting a bit stressed or feeling a bit anxious, but I'm like, oh, no, ignore it. I need to go to work. I need to do this, need to do that. The body will be like, yeah, I'm just going to keep turning these knobs up. I'm going to keep setting the house on fire, like bit by bit, until you're literally burning. And that you have to do something about this. And that's the thing. It's like, I feel like the key is to try and step. The logical part of the mind is definitely very important, but it's also to just listen and acknowledge those negative emotions or these things that we define as negative. Really try and communicate with them, and like try and listen to what they're trying to tell you, because they're just as valid a part of you as the positive sides. We always want to lean into the positive aspects of like feeling happy, feeling content. But the anxious parts, the depressed parts,
It's connection.
Yeah, it's all about connecting to self.
Yeah. How do you connect to yourself?
So on that note, like I'm in particular, I haven't done it for a while, but it's definitely a meditation that helped me a lot, and something that I will definitely dive back into. It's a meditation called Internal Family Systems, or IFS meditation. Okay. It was invented by this guy, I think he's called Richard Schwartz. Maybe I've just made that up. I'm pretty sure it's something like that. And it's basically a meditation where you communicate. It's like just to give you a bit of a background on how this meditation was invented. It was a guy who used to work with as a family therapist, and he'd like basically get like the mom to speak to the dad, to speak to the kids, like and talk to the different family members individually, and then get them to communicate with each other like together, so that like that everybody was communicating and like problems could get solved that way. And then he stopped doing that and started working with patients with eating disorders like bulimics and anorexia and different stuff. And what he found was the way that the people with eating disorders would describe the eating disorder itself, it was almost like they were describing like a member of like the part of themselves with bulimia or anorexia as a member of their own family. Yeah. And then he started thinking about this whole idea that like maybe the individual parts of ourselves, like happiness, sadness, anger, anxiousness, whatever you want to call it, could all be different members of the same family, and they all have their own individual ways of trying to communicate with us. And the issue starts is when we start ignoring and not listening to the individual parts and what they're trying to speak, because sometimes it's not nice to like listen to Like if that anxious part of you is coming up, like say like you want to speak to a girl or something, but then the anxious part of you is coming up telling you you're not good enough, blah, blah, blah. You start resenting it because it's stopping you doing what you think you should be doing. But when you actually sit down, you're like, okay, and you go into it without judgment, and you just sit down, meditate, and you start like actually delving in and communicating with that anxious part. There's a way of doing it through the meditation, but you start like listening to the message that it's trying to tell you and what it's afraid will happen if it doesn't send you that burst of emotion. Then you start to gain more understanding of how that part's developed. It usually came from a place where you like developed at school or when you're growing up in a way to protect you, and now it still feels like it needs to send you the same kind of emotions in adulthood. But by communicating with it, listening to it, acknowledging that you've heard it, writing down ways or coming to compromises with like, look, we don't need to I understand what you're trying to say, and I appreciate like just for instance, if you're talking to that part of yourself, I understand like you're trying to send me the signal and you're trying to protect us, but we don't need to do that anymore. Can we meet some kind of compromise where like if I promise that I'll do this, then you don't need to send me the signals or something. Like it's like say like
You're basically building awareness to it and giving
you're building
it space.
awareness. You're making sure that the emotion feels heard. You're like agreeing to take action on it. Say like if I'm nervous about a trip coming up, and it's taken up a lot of my energy, and I'm getting very anxious about a certain situation or something, I'll sit down, meditate. I'll listen. I'll try and tune into what the anxiety is trying to tell me. Usually there might be an emotion that comes up, say like judgment or ego, like or something that's kind of judging the anxiety itself and stopping me from feeling the emotion because it's like, oh, I'm angry with the emotion because I don't want to feel it.
Yeah.
That anger is also a part of me. So then I'll like, first of all, communicate with the anger and tell the anger like to step back and let me communicate with anxiety on its own. And just the process of doing that almost is like a release. Then it's just the process of the meditation is like actually imagining that part of yourself, that difficult emotion, like with a shape and a form that you can like clearly imagine, and you imagine it in front of you, and then you communicate with it. You have like a dialogue with that part of yourself, and like there's a whole process of how to like listen to what it's trying to tell you, and just by listening and acknowledging it, that alleviates the emotion so much, because it's just that I truly believe that none of these feelings inside, at least for my own relationship to it, happen by accident. Like it's like they're all there's a higher intelligence going on within the body that we can't quite describe, and these individual signals we should listen and pay attention to, and just try and treat with compassion and curiosity.
Yeah. And you're connecting to all parts of yourself then.
Yeah, and it's basically, that's what it comes. It's like you like, it's trying to get everybody on the same boat.
Yeah.
I really, that's one thing I've really been working on. It's like I've really made compromise with myself. So say for instance, I spent a lot of the last 6 months really working hard, like grafting, like in terms of my graphic design, because I was like, okay, it's time to make this happen. And I've made it happen. But I also made the promise to myself, to that part of me that wants the spontaneity, the adventure. I was like, look, okay, we're going to have to like, we're not going to be able to do the spontaneous stuff, the adventurous stuff for a little bit. But I promise that maybe in February or some point in the future, we're going to do more adventurous stuff. And I've already started to introduce more into my life, but it's like you make compromises with a part of yourself. Yeah. You're like, okay, for now we're going to have to hold off, but I promise that in future, I'm going to be paying attention and listening. We're going to do that. So it's like you have to, like, I've been making deals with myself so that all of the parts of myself can be in alignment and on the same boat towards the same goal and on the same mission. And it's like, I love every part of myself to a degree. Yeah. And I appreciate both aspects. I appreciate the discipline part, but I appreciate the spontaneity, the spontaneous part that's willing to just drop everything and go somewhere at the drop of a hat.
No, it makes a lot of sense to me, in the sense of that, I said that total alignment, and just saying like, I'm not, the acknowledgement that I'm not ignoring you, I'm just prioritizing this to then prioritize you later. That whole travel, that spontaneity thing, you're giving it the answer it needs, but in the right time. Yeah,
and it's just making, but it's like not lying to yourself either. Yeah, so you got to be true.
You're not denying it.
Yeah, you got to be like, you don't know if you're trying to bullshit it. Yeah, there's like a more intelligence. So it's like, stay true to your word. It's like if you promise yourself that, okay, I'm going to work hard, but then I'm going to treat myself as well. So you got to reward yourself as well. You got to like stick to your own inner promises.
Yeah. That brought up something for me where I've done last year a lot of work on my inner self, younger child, and there was a realization I had, I think it was like April, May, that my inner child didn't trust me, the person I am now, to actually listen to it. And it still doesn't fully trust me. And like, it throws out all these things like for you to hear, and you act in certain ways because it's calling for attention or, you know, affection, all those kind of stuff, or love, whatever. And it's like, until I started really spending time and putting time into listening, did some levels of trust build in, where then the reactions of these insecurities kind of reduced a little bit, I guess. Yeah. So yeah.
Well, it's almost like you just raised it before for me. And then it's almost like it's a practice now, because we're introducing this new skill to ourselves in adulthood, this communicating with our like parts and our individual emotions and actually listening to them after a lifetime of suppressing them and like not wanting to listen to them. You know what I mean? It's because it's not the best feeling in the world to like have these things pop up. They're inconvenient. They get in the way sometimes, because it's like you just want to go through life smooth, but then maybe you feel anxious, and it's like, oh bugger, like this, I don't want to feel anxious at the minute because it's going to stop me from doing this thing that I think I need to do. But if we had like a lifetime, if we were taught as kids or taught as like from a young age that, okay, when these signals come up, we don't need to ignore them. Like they're trying to tell us something. If we just sit down for 5 minutes and we actually delve into what it's trying to tell us, we'll develop a much like more cohesive sense of like self and like sense of relating and like just just alignment with self, which will help. It's like when you, like you said, it's like when you, well, for me at least, when I make that a compromise with myself, or I speak to that emotion and I'll say, look, I understand the signal you're trying to send me, and I appreciate the message and appreciate you trying to protect me. If I make this deal that I'm going to do this and this, and I keep that promise to the part of myself, it's almost like my sense of self becomes stronger and more united together, because it's starting to realize that we're all on the same team, because there's various parts of myself, like even my suicidal part, like there was a long time where I'd really like hated that part, and fair enough, because it's like it's been a part of myself that caused myself a lot of misery. But what I realized recently, at like almost like in a paradoxical sense, was my suicidal part of me has always punished me in the sense of when my life is going bad. So say I've made a mistake, something I deem as a mistake, or made a decision that hasn't worked out, or I've done something that I just find is stupid, my suicidal part will pop up and like start giving me shit, or like start sending me signals of stuff. But if it's punishing me for doing something that I deem as bad, then in contradiction to itself, or like paradoxically, that means that part of myself wants me to do things that are good. It wants me to achieve, it wants me to succeed, it wants me to do well. And something that wants you to succeed, do well, achieve, do better for yourself, in a weird way, must love you to a sense, because it wants the best for you. Yeah. And the only way that suicidal part can send signals, because that's the only way it is by sending those like really negative thoughts, because that's just how the part communicates. An anxious part of you can only communicate by sending you anxious feelings. Angry part of you can only make you angry. It's like the happiness part of you communicates by making you feel happy. And the suicidal part of me, I'm going to communicate by like sending suicidal thoughts. And in a weird way, I've become almost thankful for that part, because like you were saying earlier, it's like sometimes we've had to turn the emotion up so much, like the negative emotion gets turned up to such a degree that you can't ignore it, that it really requires instant change. It pulls you out of a very difficult situation. And like I've always described, like suicidal thoughts are like almost like the ultimate permission slip to doing what you really want to do, because it puts into perspective the almost like the fragileness of life, or the ego or mental headspace. It puts into perspective what's like truly important. When you're like in those kind of negative headspaces, real negative headspaces, like, because it's not something that limits itself to just poor and like people with nothing. Like it's something that affects the entire population. It affects like rich people a lot, like people who are rich and famous, who have all of these things that society deems as successful. It's something that affects us all. And it puts everything into perspective of just like, okay, when you feel like that, all you want is connection, like to feel happy again, to be content and living a life of peace. And when you realize, oh, well, in this life that I've created for myself really isn't giving me that, else I wouldn't be feeling like this. It gives you permission to really go after those things that scare you, because if you're already feeling miserable, depressed and suicidal, it's like, well, I might as well go after the thing that I actually might want to do or might actually give me life and love, because what's the worst that can happen? I already feel miserable, so I might as well just go after the thing I truly want to do, take the risk, do something different, because you've got nothing to lose at that point. And like I said, it's the ultimate permission slip to actually following your dreams and going after it. So it's like, with me, for instance, it's like, yeah, it was very difficult at the time, but it's also led to me making a lot of decisions that turned out to be some of the best experiences I ever had.
Thank you for sharing that. Honestly, that was, I was just happy to let you explain it, because it's a point of, I don't know, it's really, it's even though it's in the public eye, mental health and suicidal kind of tendencies and thoughts and stuff like that, and male mental health is out there as a big topic. It's the positive light to it is not shown in terms of, obviously it's not a positive light, but the positive spin you can put on it, and actually the real full picture for what it is isn't shown as clearly as what I think you just explained there. So I'm just grateful for you doing that, and I think that, you know, it's important to carry on those kind of conversations in that kind of way. And I think, despite the fact I think we could carry on talking for another like 5 hours, and the conversation will carry on, I've got one last question.
Okay.
Which usually I do with people now, which is, what's the one lesson you would like to teach your children when you have them?
Oi. Jeez Louise. One lesson I would like to teach my children, when or if I have them.
When or if you have them. If you might have had them already by mistake without realising, but...
Yeah. In a weird way, I don't, like, I wouldn't want to, there isn't anything that I can think of particularly at this moment, like, that I'd want to teach them. It'd be more, like, I feel like when they come to be, or if they come to be, or whatever they come to be, it's like we each have individual makeups of, like, who we are, like our individual recipes, test tubes, melting pots of, like, this human. We're all like a different combination of things, and it would be more like, I'd really just want them to just explore that, like, those weird things that call to them that they can't quite explain, that doesn't come from society or come from the place that they grew up, those weird interests. Like, say, like, I've got, like, a weird desire, I don't know where it's come from, to, like, go, like, travel on horseback across Mongolia at some point, I swear. Or, like, there's various things that interest me that I can't quite explain. Like, I wanted to do ballet for a while. I don't know why I was always called to ballet. But these are the things where it's like, go and explore it, you know what I mean? Find out why. They're the things that are calling you on your adventure. So it'd be more like, so with my children, it'd be more like, okay, give them experiences, allow them to, like, grow up and experience life, but also really try and push that idea of, like, self-exploration and communicating to the self, and not rejecting, like, parts of the self, and just trying to understand why they're there, how they can embody that, and then move forwards, like, to embody the, like, to the utmost, that human being that they're destined to be, you know what I mean? Because like I said, I feel like we all have our individual place, and we're all here for a particular reason, and we're all, like, parts of this overarching machine that is called consciousness, to a degree, if you want to get, like, super deep on it. But yeah, it'd be more just to really just get into the nitty-gritty of who they are. I guess as a kid it's going to be difficult to do that, but it's just, like, just to try and allow them to be more open to every individual part of themselves, I guess.
Thank you.
And explore.
Thank you. So wise. Thank you very much. And thank you for being Outlaw number 9, Jordan Carl Jones.
No problem.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Valley of Outlaws podcast. If you did enjoy it, please share, like and subscribe, and please tell all your friends about it. We are very excited for where this is going to go. We've got people to speak to and stories to tell. Thank you.